Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi, Jacqueline. How are you? How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. It was a long weekend, which is really nice. Yesterday, I kind of just had a life admin day. I didn't really do anything too crazy. I mean, not too crazy. I still did do, a run in the woods, which was really lovely and magical always. But it was mostly just a life admin day. And then the rest of the week was really lovely. I skied. Talk about skiing. Oh my gosh, Maine in the winter is going to be
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about skiing a lot. But we skied uphill and then back downhill a small mountain in Maine. So that was really, 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 really fun. That's like a new, I think, addiction I just awoke in myself.
Oh,
Have you
wow.
ever done that?
What did you use? Did you use cross country skis
We use
or
cross country
backcountry?
skis. Yeah, I know that there's the backcountry. We use cross country because it was like a very small mountain. Like it wasn't anything, crazy. I did fall a bunch of times, but it was like again, not a big deal. It was fun.
Yeah.
So, but it was
Oh,
really cool. And we went up at sunset and we had hot chocolate at the top. It was just magnificent. It was incredible. So,
that sounds great. There's like
yeah.
a cross country ski center somewhere.
It's just like a state park. Maine is truly like unmatched, I think, in terms of like winter. I mean, I guess Vermont must be up there, right? But
It's
for
the
some
same thing.
reason, yeah, okay, there you go. So yeah, state park. That's what
It's
it
not
was.
a state park where I cross country ski, but and I do that all the time, which is
Yeah.
kind of fun.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a FaceTime from you during work hours last week on the trail, being like, "Hey," and we had a mini editorial meeting
Yeah,
talking
we had
about
an
things.
editorial meeting at the Trap Family Lodge, which is not a sponsor of this
Once again.
podcast.
We're gonna get them to be. We swear.
No, no, no.
I can take us through last week's headlines. The cover story is what we're going to be focusing on this week, but basically, we did a deeper dive into the first inaugural meeting of the ad hoc working group of the NCAB, which replaced the former board of scientific advisors. So we'll get into all that. Basically, Doug Lowy, the principal deputy director of NCI, gave a more detailed director's report than Anthony Letai did, who's the actual NCI director or I guess 2 weeks ago now, at the meeting because Anthony Letai's daughter was casually competing in the Olympics. So Lowy had to
Yes.
step up. So we waited until this week to really dive into the nitty gritty. So we have a lot of details from NCI in that story. We also wrote a story. Claire took on a story about Vinay Prasad sidelining staff reviews and staff recommendations to jettison Moderna's mRNA flu shot. I think we're going to have a bigger story on that this week as well. It's definitely a developing story, but just unfortunately, further instability and chaos at FDA. For Black History Month, we had a conversation between Fumi Alapade and Robert Wynn. Really incredible conversation. Definitely worth listening to the whole conversation, even beyond just reading our story about it, because she gets into so much more detail than we did. And she tells her story really wonderfully about being born in Nigeria and coming to the US, and how that sort of informed her research in oncology. We also had a story about the NCAB concepts. Usually that is sort of a BSA adjacent story, but the new ad hoc working group did approve 7 new and reissue concepts. So that's pretty interesting as well. And then we had a guest editorial about CMS and the Inflation Reduction Act. That's sort of outside of my sort of typical comfort zone, so I won't summarize it too succinctly here, but definitely worth a read, and it's more on the pharma biotech side of our coverage. So worth checking that out as well. So yeah, Paul, do you want to take a first stab at explaining our story, or do you want me to do it since it was my
Yeah,
story?
let's actually talk through it
Yeah.
because I guess the first thing we've got to say might be that this ad hoc working group does exactly the same thing that BSA did, and has people on it who are of the same caliber as people who
Yeah.
served on the BSA. So it's a pretty great group.
Yeah.
When you look at the names who's there and listen to how they conduct themselves at that meeting,
Oh
it's
yeah.
pretty fantastic. So that part's totally undiminished.
Yeah.
So So the ad hoc working group is, so the BSA, the concepts that they get to review, that was interesting to see whether what we were looking for was whether this is business as usual.
Yeah.
And we were hoping to find business as usual.
Yeah.
And we were hoping to find questions that kind of clarify everything for our community.
Yeah.
At the time when, really the most important part of what NIH and NCI do, which is peer review, is being it's unclear.
It's changing.
Unclear.
It is changing.
Yeah, it is changing.
Well, I guess maybe not peer review proper is changing, but the weight of peer review is changing a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about that. To me, it was really heartening to see Doug step up, Doug Lowy, and to see that Dina Singer is very much involved.
Yeah.
And also to see that Tony Letai is really part of the same kind of cohort of people who understand what it is that NIH does, and that while it is, what's the most diplomatic word? While it is disconcerting to see political factors fit into it, at least technically, being a part of this. The fact that it's Letai is the presidential appointee makes me feel calm about this.
Yeah,
No.
I'm trying to find. Lowy even said that. And I think that's sort of. I agree with you. I think that is the thing that brings me the most peace. I think as all of these changes come about is. We are concerned about, or disconcerted, as you said, about.
I keep finding this very diplomatic way of saying it and failing miserably, as I always do when I try to say things diplomatically.
Well, let's just let Lowy say it. So Lowy said, peer review continues to be essential for assessing the scientific and technical merit of a proposal, and that is what we are doing as NCI reviews applications. The funding decisions will reflect a balance between cancer types, approaches, populations, and alignment with administration priorities, and the Institute recommendations needs to be signed off by a presidential appointee, and in this situation, that is Dr. Letai. We covered this or the potential of these changes all throughout last year, all throughout 2025. At one point there was talk of HHS bringing in an additional layer of presidential appointed review. It seems to be somewhat of a moving target, but it does seem that Dr. Letai, like you're saying, he is the presidential appointee, right? Like, by definition, that word that brings a little shiver to our spines. I think as we think about all the changes he's brought.
Very
to
diplomatically
HHS.
said.
I know. I almost said something harsher, and I didn't.
Beautiful job. Compliment your diplomacy. And
yes. This presidential appointee is Dr. Letai, and I think Lowy was smart to sort of remind everybody of that. Not that people, legitimately forget, but I think to have that center of mind that we are in good hands. We're in expert hands. We're in hands that the field agrees are very capable. So that was very I think reassuring, but still it's a little bit. I think the fact that the peer review and the pay lines, again, I've only been here before pay lines for, 2 or 3 years, but to be without pay lines feels weird even for me. It feels destabilizing, I think maybe is both polite and diplomatic, but also very accurate. I think destabilizing is the word that I would choose, even if I was not trying to be.
Yeah. Plus, grading the science there's a lot of flexibility there and a lot of variation.
That's
so,
true.
What's the difference between the 3rd percentile and the 4th percentile and the 5th percentile and the 6th percentile? I don't know. I've never done this myself, and it's probably a good thing. But I hear people have been saying it all along for years and years and years and years that the difference is pretty marginal. And at one point, actually, Harold Varmus would take a bunch of the applications that were kind of marginal home with him to New York to re-review, which was an interesting concept. But really, he was very excited about doing it, and then I hope he stopped. I don't know. It's irrelevant now, but he was really just taken by this intellectual problem of finding the margins and figuring out what's in the margins or what's on the margins, and that's important, I guess. And in this case, when we don't know where the pay line is,
there is no pay line.
Yeah, there is a pay line, but the decisions are not made based on pay line alone. And the reason you were sort of maybe theoretically in the past making decisions based on pay lines was in order to avoid subjectivity and the fact that, we all like and trust Doug Lowy, and we all like and trust Dean Singer and Anthony Letai, especially in this case, is relevant. The objective is just to say, hey, this is apolitical. And here they're saying, well, it has to be connected and consistent with the political priorities of the administration. But then again, the same sort of thing where you don't really know what's the difference between 3% and 4% and third percentile, or fifth. What is the difference between political and apolitical, and where are they? There's a lot of stuff going on here, which is kind of squishy, and it's always been somewhat squishy.
Totally. And I mean, I think that it comes back to that trust idea. Like, if we can trust those and, the people in power, then of course the squishiness is okay. But, that's, I think, where we feel a little bit. But I realized, Paul, that we really kind of buried the lead a little on this.
Yes, we did. We're experts at that. The lead burial. Go ahead, dig it out.
I will dig it out, zombify the lead. The lead is that this is the first meeting of this group, of course, but it also happens to be the first, public NCI meeting after President Trump signed the FY26 funding bill. So this is the first sort of public display from NCI, from Letai, from Lowy, after, they actually have their appropriation. They know what they're actually getting from Congress. So I think that I went into this thinking that we were going to have a lot of answers, a lot. And in some ways we did, right? Like we know about, the funding numbers, of course. And we know about, what was it? The forward funding caps, et cetera, indirect cost caps. We know a lot of the stipulations that were included in the funding bill, but there are important caveats that Lowy talked about. So I buried the lead again. The lead is...
Yes, double buried the lead.
Double buried. I brought it back to life and I killed it again. And now here it is. It's that even with NCI getting an increase from the FY26 funding bill, the purchasing power, the buying power of NCI is 18% lower than it was in 2003. So it's like, yay, we have a little bit of a raise, but still, money is still tight is kind of the message. But also I think it's just an important and somewhat interesting angle to think about. Yes, we have all of these answers from Congress, but there is still so much unknown. For example, the forward funding. I'm going to get that up as well. But basically, it's the congressional language says the answer about forward funding. You cannot have more than last year. But there's so many different ways that HHS and NIH and therefore NCI can interpret that. And so that is still unknown. They're still waiting from NIH to hear that. They're still waiting on NIH and a bunch of other things, including, making sure that NCI's priorities are heard at an NIH level when, we're talking about centralization and a little more politicization of grant funding as well. So all this rambling basically to say is that, we have a lot of answers, but we have a lot of questions, and our answers are not necessarily they might be a little misleading. Yes, we got a raise, but money's still tight, like I said.
Well, we should also kind of go back for a moment to talk about the kind of the post-pay line world. A lot of the money is one of the considerations is geographic distribution, which makes a lot of people really cringe. But it also makes some people say, yeah, it's not necessarily a bad idea. I mean, there are great things being done in some of the greatest institutions and research institutions in America, but also some of this needs to go out into other places, other centers as well. So seeing some of the science move to the Louisianas, North Carolinas, South Carolinas, to whatever or Kansas, Missouri, is that a bad thing? I'm not going to say it's a bad thing.
Not our job. No, but I hear you.
I would probably, if I were the king of the world, I would keep my hands out of this whole thing. But I'm not the king of the world, and probably I'm not on that track. But
probably, maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it actually all of this is not hopeless. All of this is actually possibly even okay.
Yeah. And I mean, that was brought up at the meeting. Ali Shilatafard, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I apologize. But he is a member of the working group and chair of the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Genetics at the Simpson Query Institute for Epigenetics of the Robert H. Lurie Comprehensive Cancer Center. I figured if I don't know how to pronounce his name perfectly, I should give his Western?
Northwestern. It's a thing.
Oh! I thought I said something wrong. Oh my God.
Northwestern.
All that to say is that he was, I think, the primary member of the ad hoc working group that brought up this concern about specifically about regional distribution of grant money versus meritocracy. And him and Lowy had like a really interesting and once again, like you said, everybody in this group is of incredible caliber in how they discuss these things. They had a very respectful and I think informative sort of back and forth about that, and that's in the story. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a little long, but basically those 2 points were made, and it seems clear that NCI is at least hearing that. Leadership is aware of that perspective. And I think that's, like you said, that will be decided. There's two other things I just wanted to mention. They're both a little bit up in the air, as is a lot of other stuff in this story. But I wanted to give our listeners a heads up of what might be coming from NCI based on what we know. So last year in 2025, NCI, along with other institutes and centers, were instructed to reduce the number of NOFOs, which are Notice of Funding Opportunities, by about 50%. And so, NCI and other institutes scrambled to get that, to meet that requirement. But basically, as that continues, one of the ways that they've gotten around that is they can combine NOFOs because these are, just the notices of funding opportunity. So just in the future, or I don't think they said exactly when it's going to start, but there's a new funding mechanism that is replacing the R01 and the R21 announcement. See, this is it's tricky, right? This is a quote from Dina Singer. She says there's a new funding mechanism. I'm assuming she means NOFOs, but who knows? But you're going to see, which is going to advertise what was formerly covered by R01 and R21, and that is called the RP1. I believe that she is speaking of NOFOs only. I don't think that this is a new funding mechanism entirely, but we'll have to watch that closely. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring to readers' attention is the idea of a highlighted topic. And this is what you can kind of mention what you spoke about at our at our meeting earlier, Paul, is the idea that there are these new basically areas of scientific inquiry that are replacing and centralizing what was formerly called the Notice of Special Interest. They represent a selective research priority within one or more NIH institutes. So it's not with like dedicated funding or anything. It's sort of just like this is a research priority, and hypothetically maybe NCI, maybe a couple other institutes are interested in it. There's a link. The link will be in the description. And while this is new, Lowy did ask the members of the working group to do their best to communicate these new highlighted topics, as well as the rest of what was discussed at the meeting with their communities. So there was a real charge by Lowy to ask the working group members to be part of the communication movement or effort, I guess. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Paul.
Yeah, no, to me, that was really interesting, because here's NCI that used to have a really excellent communications function that had to get rid of it, or was commanded to get rid of it. It was all doged, and they kind of need to be communicating with people rather than relying on word of mouth or samizdat. There has to be a real systematic approach, which it no longer has. And by the way, that is in the National Cancer Act of 1971, that very issue. So right now, and I did hear Tony Letai say that that's something that he really needs to address somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very interesting time to be a journalist, isn't it?
It is. It very much is. That's the thing. Is things change all the time. I spend most of my time in being in question. Is that, can I form a new phrase? Being in question rather than being in certainty. I feel like most of the time I'm really not sure and figuring things out. And as a journalist, I do think that I would say that most journalists enjoy that feeling, and that's why they go into journalism. So thankfully I'm enjoying it, but it's definitely a change. It's a lot to learn.
Well, looking at your story, which about the ad hoc committee meeting, I really enjoyed the polemic, the whole sort of a discussion of what is happening by people that I respect.
Yeah.
And you caught that.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of thing that if I were a reader, I would probably want to sharpen the number 2 pencil, get a printout, and go through it, because it's there's a lot between the lines. There's a lot that is stated for the first time. There's a lot of kind of a political and historical perspective that can be brought onto it. And I think that's probably what we just did in this long, rambling episode in which you buried the lead not once, but twice.
That's my job. That's why you're my editor.
The cancer letter, we bury the lead. We did T-shirts.
I would buy that T-shirt. That one I'm in.
You can have it for free if we make it.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah, it's a perk of the job.
Awesome.
And maybe on the back it should say, "This is a great time to be a journalist."
Yes.
We buried the lead.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul. This was a lovely episode, and I will see you next week.
Yeah. All right. See you next week.